Hello and welcome to our common future. On October 22nd, Tringaling Muivah visited his ancestral village in Somdal in Manipur for after almost 50 years, maybe more than 50 years. He had earlier sought permission to visit his village in 2010, but the then UPA government had refused. This time, the Modi government not only allowed him to go, it also ensured that he had received a huge welcome. Now, his visit is being viewed as both historic and symbolic, given that all communities, Metis, Kukis, Zomis, and even Pangals, welcomed him. Some say that his visit will provide a healing touch to Manipur, which has been roiling in sectarian violence for the last 3 years. So, while his visit and the timing of his visit is very interesting, and we will talk about it in a while, even more interesting has been his address to the people there. It was read since he was not well, he couldn't speak himself so well. So the address was read on his behalf by his junior colleague. And in this address, Muivah spoke about the inviolable sovereignty of Nagalim from time immemorial. He urged his fellow Nagas, especially the new generation, to continue the struggle for Nagalim as their bounden duty. In fact, curiously, he invoked religion to urge them that for Christ, they have to fight for Nagaland. I mean, Nagalim for Christ is what he said. He also said that the independent Naga flag and independent Naga national flag and Naga national constitution were were non-negotiable in any peace talks with the government of India. And when he referred to the framework agreement, which was signed in 2015 with the Modi government, to which he was one of the signatories, he's called it in his address that it was an agreement between two sovereign powers, and that it was agreed during his talks with the government that the issue of Nagalim was not an internal matter of either the government of either India or of Myanmar. Now, all of this has raised many disturbing questions. To discuss which these questions, I'm joined by Nandita Haksar, a human rights lawyer. Incidentally, Muivah has thanked Nandita profusely in his address for the role she played in the peace process. Nandita, a prolific writer, has written several books on Nagaland, Naga struggle, as well as sufferings of the Naga people. She also contributed a chapter on the peace process in which she played a sterling role for this book, The Peacemakers, which I had edited a few years back. And so, Nandita, welcome to our common future, and thank you for agreeing to talk to me.
Thank you, Gazala.
Okay, so before we come to Muivah's address, how do you see his visit to Manipur, especially its timing?
Well, I think what you began in your introduction about it being symbolic and historic, I would like to just spend 5 minutes or a little bit on who Muivah is. I think people don't even know his history other than the fact that he's a leader of of a very militant group. And it is important uh, to understand the person, the human being.
Right.
He's 91.
Yes.
And as you said, that it's after around 50, 60 years that he's returning. So he lived in this small village of Somdal. He was from a very, very poor family. He and his father used to go to Ukrul, which was a 2 days very hard walk, and work in the fields of the Metes. And he got 5 rupees, maybe in 1930s, of which he was excited that he can buy a shirt or underwear. This he told me in an interview which we published in a book, which I can show you.
Right.
So this, what he says in his book, in the interview, is that the question that rose in his mind during those days and as he was growing up is that why are Nagas humiliated by the Metes, by the Kukis, by the Indians? Because the only Indians he saw, well, before the Indians, they were the British, the American missionaries, the Japanese, and then the Indians.
Right.
Now, this is a question that he grew up with because he was working in the Meitei fields, getting very little. He couldn't enter a Meitei house because of caste system. And those memories stuck in his mind, and he grew up. And the only Indians he saw at that point of time were traders.
Right.
So who exploited, or they, that's the business, which of course Nagas don't enter into. So business by itself is exploitation. So here was this young boy in a village who grew to challenging the Indian state. So as a human story, I think that's a very interesting story, a very important story. And even to the extent that the Indian state, which he has challenged and fought against, has had to respect him, was
Right.
in talks with him, and also facilitated his visit to his village.
Right.
So, to me, that is a very important moment in history. And I think that media just didn't catch it because they were interested in the immediate political uh, ramifications, which
Mhm.
I don't think they were in that case, because neither his speech reflected. It was a visit to his home, a
Mhm.
last visit to see his grave of his parents, to the place where he grew up, in
Right.
the rice fields where he met his wife, as a young girl. So I think the significance of this visit is more human, both for him and for the people around. So
Right.
that is the one thing which I think we should keep in mind, because sometimes the human aspect gets lost when we are discussing all this politics. Now coming to the significance, the political significance.
Right.
Well, everyone has welcomed him, and that's for different reasons. Each community has welcomed him for different reasons. And I think finally, those are not really important as, I mean, I can discuss them, but I know some communities had opposed his visit, and that's why it was not really the Congress, but it is not the UPA government which allowed and said he can go, but the majority community had actually opposed his visit. So now the Nagas are with Meiteis, and although they have not been part of the ethnic fight, this alliance has also ensured that the Meiteis welcomed him.
Okay.
So these are the local politics. But as for his asking for the constitution and flag, can I go into that a little
No,
bit?
I'll come to that in 2 minutes. So I
Okay,
first wanted to understand what did he mean by referring to sovereignty? What did he said sovereignty of Nagalim? What did that mean?
okay, okay. So there are two aspects to it. One is when the Nagas or the Naga national movement refers to Naga areas, and they started calling it Nagalim to distinguish it from Nagaland, which is a state within the Indian
Right.
state.
Mm.
So Nagalim to them means the Naga areas which are within Nagaland, some parts of Naga areas of Assam, of Arunachal, of Manipur, and the Naga areas in Myanmar,
Right.
which are also divided into two. One is the autonomous state of Nagaland, and some parts are in another province of Myanmar.
Right.
So that is the area which they refer to, and they refer to this as their country or Nagalim. But the second part, which I think is a problem to me historically,
Right.
is that when we say that India is a country from times immemorial, or Nagaland is a country from times immemorial, that is historically incorrect.
Right.
Because Nagas were not a nation from time immemorial, there were no nation states. They were villages, there were tribes. Even tribes came later, they were independent villages. And similarly in India, India may have been somewhat some kind of civilizational idea, but it was not, it was a modern state. It was born in 47. So this reference to time immemorial is incorrect in any narrative that people take to justify their contemporary demands.
Right.
So that is that. So their assertion that they have been a sovereign people, nobody was sovereign. We were all under the British. Parts of Naga areas were direct British rule, and some were not direct but indirect rule. but it was still a British rule.
Right. So then coming to this national flag and Naga National Constitution, uh, uh, was this on the table when the framework agreement was being negotiated with the government of India, or is it shifting the goalpost now?
No, I don't think it's a question of shifting. I think from 97, the important thing to remember is that in 97, when NSCN did sign the ceasefire agreement, and they sat down for talks.
Right.
Now, Muivah, unlike I'd say for many other people in the NSCN, is a political person. And he knows that he went to China, he got help of China, he went to Pakistan, he got help of Pakistan. But in the end, he has to negotiate with the Indian state, and which he did. He sat on a table, across the table, in from 97 to today. One of the things which doesn't come out, and which I would like to say, because I have been privy to many of these discussions, that neither the Indian side nor the Naga side ever really had a negotiating document.
Oh,
So
okay.
you have to have a document on which you negotiate. So then you negotiate, we agree to this, we don't agree to this, we want that. It was not. It was just one major demand, integration of Naga areas. And that was the area where it got stuck, because when the Nagas said that the integration of Manipur Naga areas, that's when the Meiteis threw up a fit and said, no, integrity of Manipur cannot be challenged. And that's where the talks have got stuck. So that is really what happened. But there was a kind of program which was put up, a kind of, shall I say, a plan was put by R.S. Pandey, which was called a non-plan.
Okay.
But that was discussed, and it was discussed not only among the NSCN, but the NSCN called lawyers from all over the world. Some of them, one of them, he's mentioned Michael in his address. Another was Anthony Regan from Australia. Another one who was a constitutional expert from Kenya. And I was the only person from India who was there. And we discussed this non-plan, and we had a very good discussion. And we gave it a legal, how to enforce that into a legal program. From what I know, Mr. Muivah and Isaac Su, neither of them disagreed, and they were quite willing to work on it. But suddenly it was sabotaged. And after that, I don't think there's any concrete program. The
What were the
2000,
key features of that non-plan?
one of the key features which was put forward was a kind of a non-territorial integration.
Okay. What would that mean? That
That
the
would,
boundaries, state boundaries remain where they were?
yeah, but a supra Naga council could have emerged.
Okay.
But the issue is what kind of powers it would have,
Right.
how its relationship with the legislative assembly would be.
Right.
And all these things had to be worked out, which I'm not free to speak about. But
Right.
this much has come out in the papers, and it was there. And it was a good idea, because it would be worked upon, of what kind of autonomy, what kind of self-determination. The framework agreement, which I have published in your magazine, shows both. We published the NSCN version and the Indian version. Neither of them has any program. It is just that it's a framework agreement between two entities. It does not say sovereign.
Yes,
So
but in
two
his
entities
address now, he says sovereign powers.
But it was, and I would like to point out that I don't think he wrote that by himself entirely, because he's not being able to write.
Right.
So who is representing him and why it is done? Maybe he saw it, maybe he didn't. But he has always said, and in the document it says two entities.
Right.
Now that can be interpreted in any way, but it's obviously not two sovereign powers, because India would not be negotiating with a sovereign power on territory which it thinks is its own.
That's
so
true.
These are legal matters, constitutional matters. So that is the issue. So that is one aspect. Some of these things like negotiating, I think the major issue to me has been throughout that these talks are secret. So the contents of the talks, the contents of this even 215 agreement, were never disclosed to the Nagas by the NSCN. They were never disclosed by the Indian government to the Indian people. So these are talks, secret talks, in which nobody was privy. Nobody could really intervene. And people were intervening on the basis of what people said that was in the talk, in the agreement of 215, which it wasn't.
Right.
And it was done in a hurry because Mr. Isaac Sue was not well. And soon after that, in fact, he signed that agreement from a hospital bed. So it had a significant symbolic significance that they were committed to talks, but there were no contents on which they could really base further talks.
Right. Uh, Subsequently, you did see the framework agreement, and as you mentioned, we published it as part of your article in Force magazine. But can you just tell the viewers what were the key areas in on which both sides had agreed to take the talks forward?
I think if I'm not sure exactly, but I remember that they said there are two entities. And second, that India recognized the unique history
Mm.
of the Naga people. Now, that cannot be interpreted as sovereignty because each of our people, like the Tamils, are definitely a unique history and they would be asserting their unique history. Or each of us are proud of each part. I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that my mother is from Awadh, and there was a tradition of composite culture which is part of Awadh. It's not
Yes.
part of whole of India. So it depends. And someone is proud of their being Punjabi because there's a Punjabian. So, in that sense, a unique history of the people is an acknowledgement that Nagas are a unique people. They have their own history, which India must respect. It's not a admission on part of Indian state that Nagas have been or are or can be sovereign. And I'm just talking legally, constitutionally.
Right. Right. Another, one more thing which I found very curious in his address, which probably he did not write, as you mentioned that he's 91 years old, he's ailing, was this frequent invocation of religion. You know, he constantly talks about Christ, and he even refers to, uh, this land being given to the Naga people by Christ, by Lord. What about the Naga, their old traditional belief system? You've done so much work on Nagaland and Naga people. I mean, did write a book called "Who Are the Nagas?" So, who exactly are the Naga people? How are they different? You know, each tribe is different from another. And what about the Nagas who now are part of Myanmar?
No, there are two separate questions. One is the making of a Naga nation, and the other is the question of religion. So
No,
let me
I'm not
address
talking of the nation. I'm talking of Nagas as people.
Naga nation as they define their nation.
Okay, okay,
No? So let me address the religion question, which I think is far more important in this
right,
context.
right,
First of all, when the idea of a Naga nation of unity of about 30, 40 different tribes speaking different languages, but sharing a kind of a shared history, that was in, well, I mean, it started with Fizo.
okay,
That time, the constitution of the NNC did not talk about Nagaland for Christ.
right,
This idea, this slogan came much, much later. Now, I think two things happened. One is when the Nagas went to China, that is 66, when Mr. Muivah led the first lot of people to China, the fear of the Indian state was that this would bring communism to the country.
okay,
This was part of the Cold War. That
right,
was the time of the fear of that.
right,
And the fact that they call themselves in 80 the Socialist Council, which is
right,
not part of the normal Naga narrative.
right,
Here, the Indian state played one role. The Indian intelligence agencies used the church to say that these are God fearing people, they're bringing in communism, and raised a fear of communism to the extent that the NSCN had to prove that it is not doing that. And there were a lot of, they were, Mr. Isaac Su and Mr. Muivah were camping in Myanmar. And at that point of time, there were a lot of forced conversions of Myanmar villagers living there who were Buddhist or they practiced the indigenous religion. Mr. Isaac Su actually denied that there were forced conversions. I would like to put on record that that's what he denied, and that's
Okay.
in an interview. But there are many independent records about these forced conversions. That is number one.
Right.
Number two, this area, this whole area of Northeast, including Nagaland especially, has been called the Bible Belt. So
Yes.
there is a growth of a fundamentalist Christianity, and I would like to distinguish between some Christianity, which is, there are many kinds of Christianity, and this fundamentalist Christianity, which is the Baptist Church of the kind of which supports Mr. Trump in the USA. And there are many Nagas in America which support Mr. Trump.
Mhm.
So there are these links. And it is a growing aspect of Naga national movement that it has moved from being a national movement for self-determination into being a religious movement. And I would compare this, I don't know whether you would agree, but with Kashmir, which was again a multinational, multi-religious movement for self-determination where all, that had Buddhist areas, Muslim areas, Shia areas, Sunni areas, Hindu areas, to a religious fundamentalist movement. So
I remember your book, Two Faces of Nationalism.
okay, so that is again the problem, is that where this fundamentalism comes and how it influences. And again, Mr. Muivah himself, that I think I could say, because there's a long interview. Can I just show? I don't like normally
Yes.
publicizing,
No,
but
no,
this is
please.
the book in which there's a long interview of his and Isaac So. And
Right.
this was accepted by them. It was just, I have not cut it, or I've just reproduced the interview.
Just show the cover. Okay. No, the cover. I can only see the name, your name.
Oh,
Oh, I have this book. I
okay.
have this book.
So
Yes,
this is a book.
Nalim.
So that is, the first section has a long interview.
Right.
So you will see that Mr. Muivah actually, not only did he go to China in 66, he spent 10 years in China, which I think people don't remember. He was with Mao Zedong. He went to Vietnam. He was certainly not a Christian fundamentalist.
Right.
But this is the pressure from the growing fundamentalist Christian fundamentalist movement, number one, and within his own people, which he cannot resist, and he's isolated many times. And that is the reason why there's a lot of tension, ideological tension, which we do not see and which is not discussed either by them or by anyone else. So this is, when he talks about Nagaland for Christ, that was not the Nagalim for which he took up arms in 66.
Right. You think this movement, the movement of converting the struggle of the Naga people for self-determination into a religious movement, it also has financial implications. Does it also come with funding for their struggle?
I don't know. I mean, I can't say exactly because I don't know where their funds come from. But a large amount in the past, I know that they had very little money. He
Right.
himself and Mr. Isaac Su and Mr. Muivah had no money. They had no property. They had no assets. But after that, a lot of the other NSCN leaders have bought, a lot of property. They're well off. They have huge houses, televisions, all the consumer goods. There is no critique of consumerism within their movement.
Right.
So where they come from, I cannot say. But definitely a lot of it also comes from tax, what they call tax, which the Naga people have started calling extortion.
Right. Related to this, again, another thing that I found curious in his address was reference to Israeli people wandering through the years, centuries, till they reached their promised land. Oh, again, a very curious allusion to Israeli people and comparing them with the Naga people.
Yes, so that comes from the Christian fundamentalists. If we see the history of Zionism,
Yes,
the Zionists, actually the first Zionists were Christian Zionists.
right,
And so this history is carried on by the fundamentalists. That's part of the Christian fundamentalist. Actually, this word fundamentalism, in fact, comes first from the Christian fundamentalists. And this whole narrative, which we now hear, with the context of the genocide in Gaza,
Yes.
and everyone is talking in religious terms in the context of Israel. Well,
Right.
the same kind of narrative is among the Nagas. And a section of the Nagas who supports Mr. Trump also supports Israel.
Okay.
And a section of the Cookies, because the first martyr, if we wish to call him that, on Gaza soil, the Israeli army was a Cookie.
Really?
Because the Cookies said, one section of the Cookies said that they were the lost tribe.
Oh, okay.
So
So,
you see, this kind of narrative comes, from my understanding, from a lack of politics
uh,
and a lack of real understanding of their own religion, their context, what is Israel, who was Palestine. So this kind of very reactionary politics. And I would like, just for my own sake, that when you asked me why was I involved, at a stage when they were talking about Nagas of 30 tribes coming together, when the Naga student movement came together, each tribe, whether it was large or small, had two representatives. So the Angamis, which were a huge tribe, had two representatives. Tarao, which had just 3 villages, had two representatives. For me, it was very attractive, a democratic idea. And I thought that would be wonderful if we could learn from some of their democratic principles. But I think all that vision is lost with the coming of fundamentalism and this kind of fundamentalism. And this fundamentalism is not local grown. This fundamentalism is definitely linked to the American Baptist Church and to the kind of politics which we see in America.
right. In the same address, Muivah has referred to what we would call counterinsurgency operations against the Naga militants. He has referred to them as battles. And he has spoken about a series of battles in which Nagas did so well. He's named some Naga martyrs. Some fancy ranks have been attributed to them. Uh, all of this can be seen as provocative. Do you think maybe whoever has spoken on his behalf is trying to suggest that young Naga people once again pick up arms?
No, let me say one thing, that very clearly they're not fancy name, because they have a regular army,
Right,
a Naga army, which is very well equipped and very well trained.
right,
And that is the reason why there's a ceasefire agreement between India and Nagas. And a ceasefire agreement is between two armies.
right.
And during the talks, they actually had designated camps where the Naga army can stay and, keep their arms.
Weapons, yes.
So,
You
so
mentioned that.
therefore, we must remember that that itself was a unique idea,
Mhm.
that an independent state allows uh, a people to carry their arms, which under Indian law are illegal.
Right,
And sometimes in the course of the talks, when the Indian army would confiscate those arms, then during the talks, these arms would be given back.
okay,
So it was very interesting if we see in the early days how this ceasefire was working out.
right,
So that is the issue. As for young people today, there are many kinds of young people, of course.
all right,
And I would like to say, when we talk about Naga people today, in the old days, it was a tribe. There were tribes. So there was not that hierarchy. But today, there is a middle class, which is
right,
definitely linked to the Indian state. It's a beneficiary of all the reservation in various ways. It has benefited, it has prospered, especially those middle class, which is in Nagaland. So therefore, but they have a vested interest, and they take advantage of the Naga movement to further their own interests. They're not furthering the interests of Naga people,
mhm,
because as the Naga people, the ordinary people in the villages, they have become poorer and poorer. And the division between the poor and the rich Nagas has
mhm.
grown.
Right,
And the movement, as of now, which of course I would like to point out that this IM, which is the NSC and IM,
yes,
I is Isaac Suri died. Now it is split into 5 or 6 NSCNs. They have never represented especially the demands of the Naga poor. So when it's a nationality movement which does not take into account the class part and the divisions on the basis of class, it represents the middle class interests.
I'm finding it very, very interesting. So, where did their foot soldiers come from? If it was not representing the interests of the poor, why would poor get involved in the movement?
Well, lot of them during the peace talks, and which I think lot of the normal security people who talk about Indian security have pointed out that during the peace talks there have been a large amount of recruitment. And why? Because they're poor. That's an alternate source of job,
Right.
because they get food, they get some, I don't know whether they get money, but probably they get some stipend. So
Right.
these are soldiers who get in peacetime, they're getting some employment. There is no employment now opportunities. That's why so many thousands of Nagas and people from Northeast generally have come to the Indian states and gone abroad as migrant workers.
Right. You know, finally, my last question. In your essay in The Peacemakers, you end on a very pessimist note. You say that both the government of India and the Naga leadership, they lack vision. Because any peace talk requires both pragmatism and magnanimity. That was your last sentence. How do you feel about it now?
The same. Actually, that's the article that last I wrote, that they have the peace talks. I don't think there are any peace talks. They have not admitted that they have failed.
Right.
And they have failed because they never put forward a document on which they would negotiate. And India did not have, they could have put forward, they could have helped them because they were insurgents. They may be very brave, they may be courageous, they may be good at the army, but they had no lawyers, they had nobody to explain what a constitution is. And finally, in at a time when two things happened, one, 370 was suddenly taken away, and I was the one who was teaching the constitution to the Nagas. I was trying to say, well, you can negotiate, you can have space within India. But then they asked that, can this, whatever we negotiate, can it be taken away? And yes, it can, because the
Yes.
sovereign power, sovereignty lies with India. I cannot tell them a lie that it cannot be taken away. So that was another thing which they felt, that even if they negotiate, then those promises are not kept. And the same thing in another level was Sikkim. It was associate state. Within a year, it became a normal state.
Yes.
So these are the questions which we could learn. I don't, well, it is a, well, I was in a sense pessimistic, but now I see real politics is not of idealism, but some idealism, some vision has to inform it. Otherwise, it becomes what it has. It's got so many divisions. And I don't think that has helped India, because now you have nobody to negotiate with, nobody to talk to,
Mhm.
nobody represents anybody.
Right. But you know, the state of India, the Indian state is very large. It has the capacity to absorb these setbacks. But uh, let's say people, Naga people, they obviously cannot absorb that much of a setback that the government of India can. So, from their perspective, wouldn't just accepting the conditions of the government of India and negotiating within those parameters for some kind of a respectable agreement, wouldn't that be beneficial for them?
Well, I do compare, which they do not agree. But for instance, the Alpha had agreed, negotiated agreement in Thailand, in which they insisted that every district has a super specialty hospital, they get some refineries, they get some industry, and they got it. It's
Right.
part of their settlement. Now, for the NSCN, it seemed as if it was not enough, but that their people needed. There are no hospitals, people don't have hospitals. Ukhrul state, where he went, and I do know that area, that's where my husband is from, so I do know it personally. There are no hospitals readily available. The schools have no teachers.
Right.
There is, the villages which are far on the hilly areas are very poor, they do not have water. Even Ukhrul does not have water.
Okay.
So for my understanding is that even if you have a political goal for some independence or some future goal, a negotiated statement in which you get something for your people who have sacrificed so much for your movement, I think would be a correct political thing. For after that, you fight continuously in other ways. But they've not, even when they went to China, they went to Pakistan, they got help from, various agencies in the West. Indian state is too powerful. So politics demands negotiation.
That's
It's
true.
not, I do not speak as in, from Indian state. I speak as an activist who has fought the Indian state. But the Naga people have become an identity movement in which they do not have alliances with Indians. And therefore, they cannot move ahead. And only the middle class will do very well, which it is doing. And the poor people will be left out, and the migrant workers' conditions are really pitiful if you see around in Delhi itself.
Right. On that note, thank you so much, Nandita, for taking the time out. And I wish you all the best with the weather and with your asthma. Please take care.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.